Carl, one thing that strikes us, do young footballers only thrive if the environment is right, or is that a get-out? Yesterday, in this very studio with Danny Murphy, we were discussing Jadon Sancho going from outcast at United, training on his own, to a Champions League finalist now with Borussia Dortmund. Where's your head with this? When players seemingly fall off a cliff, how much is that in the club against how much is it on the player?
I think everybody needs the right environment to succeed, regardless whatever you do in life. For me, you do try everything and you do exhaust every avenue to try and make these players better, make them know that you care for them, show love, attention to detail. But sometimes that isn't enough. They actually do need a change. And I think in Jadon's situation right now, he's come across from Dortmund. He was a, 75 million at the time? Was it something crazy like that?
Yes.
For a young player. We spoke before, Manchester United. Playing for Manchester United is different to playing for Borussia Dortmund. He struggled with that for whatever reason. Yeah. I don't think he hasn't not been shown love. Somebody at the football club would have put their arm around him. There would have been psychologists, there would have been managers, there would have been players that would have tried to exhaust every avenue to make him feel comfortable at that football club. And sometimes, remember Sam saying to me once, a lot of managers sometimes they sign players and they try and keep them and they do everything to try and make them happy. And sometimes your best avenue and your only avenue is by getting them out of your football club and not being frightened of them succeeding somewhere else. And actually, in this case, him doing well could be a detriment for Man United now, could actually sell him for more money than what they could have if they would have kept him in the building. So they do need the right environment, 100%. But it doesn't mean that you always have that right environment. Because there'll be some players that will go into Manchester United and that will be the right environment for them. And I've tried everything with certain players and it's just not worked.
Oh, one of those, and I know you still speak to him, Dele Alli. And as you're speaking, there's Mick in Southport, one of many people sending in messages. Great show as always. Thanks, mate. Could Carl give us some insight on young Dele Alli, who he brought through at MK Dons, and now, of course, we know what's happened. He seems to be falling away. The last time you were in the studio, you were saying, I speak to him on a semi-regular basis. Yeah, and that he would still get back to his best. Yeah. He was even being spoken about recently in conversations about England and Germany in the Euros. That's not going to happen. Of course that's not going to happen.
Well, it's not going to happen in this Euros, no, for obvious reasons. One, he's not fit, first and foremost, and secondly, he's not played any football for 2 years.
But the chances are, Carl, it's never going to happen.
And play a top-level games, you have to be playing top-level games consistently to get that.
The chances are he's out the equation until he's back in it. We don't expect to see him back in it,
Dele's
do we?
different to Jadon, isn't he? Everyone will keep going back to Dele for where he was and where he is today. Jadon's completely different. It's a completely different story to Dele because he's actually gone from Manchester United and gone to Borussia Dortmund and being one of their best players and led them to a Champions League final. So he still has that hunger to succeed and to do his best at Dortmund. And he's proven a lot of people wrong. Everyone thought he'd gone back there to say it was the easy option. He's gone back there and he'd be playing at Wembley in a few months' time, a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
So I think what Manchester United have done there, they've obviously tried everything with Jane and gone, right, go back to where you feel comfortable, go and play your football, and they'll raise the market value of the player, and possibly he'll be sold in this summer to go on to other things, and they'll get some of their money back that they can re-spend somewhere else in the team.
In the case of Dele Alli, and I know you've spoken about it before, and I know it's been well documented, he's opened up about childhood issues, of course, and we thoroughly respect what Dele has come through in his life and the hardship that has brought to him. But MK Dons, and I remember saying to you, I was at one of the games that day, and he shone at the MK Dons stadium. So if the environment was right then that you created, why was it not right when he went further and higher to a higher level in the game?
Well, Tottenham was the right environment for him. There was proof in his meteoric rise. It wasn't just MK Dons. What Mauricio did with him at Tottenham was incredible, and he got to a Champions League final himself. People forget at Spurs. Everybody's got a backstory. Everybody's got a problem in their lives that is deep rooted. And at certain stages, when we find life difficult, it does come back to bite at certain stages. But we all sit in this room. We've all had issues at certain stages, and every now and then it does come to the forefront of our mind. Some people have different coping mechanisms. Some people have better coping mechanisms. And I think in Dele's case, first and foremost, his was something that he had to deal with personally. He then comes back and then gets injured, which then sets him back even further, probably another 12 months. But we started this conversation with Jadon Sancho. He's not injured. He's obviously gone back to where he feels comfortable.
Yeah.
And I think in development, that's not a bad way of doing things. You've got a young player. It's not worked for whatever reason, and we all have an opinion on that. And there's so many fabricated stories of some of the good, the bad, and the ugly at Manchester United. But actually, tell you what, that's where he's been good. Go back to where you were good. Feel safe. Got the right people around you, and fans that like you. And they've given him an opportunity. And I watched him play in the first leg, and he was the best player on the pitch. He really was. He was outstanding in that game. So for me, that's been really good business for Manchester United to go back to where you're safe. Go back and perform.
But Jim, it depends what you characterise as a young player. I mean, if we're talking about 18, 19-year-old players, when Jadon Sancho came from Borussia Dortmund, he played 100 times for Borussia Dortmund. He was 21, 22 years of age. When he's gone off the reservation, he's 23. These are not young players anymore. These are players that have been playing professional football for 5 or 6 years. If you don't have a productive environment, of course you're not going to have people respond to it, whatever age they're at. And the Dele Alli challenge for me, I think, is a lot about the people, the company that you keep, people that you have around you, and the advice that you're given. Because, I was always very disappointed when he turned up at Everton. He looked, as I said, like a refugee from the Pirates of the Caribbean. He's being paraded around the pitch, in terms of his latest signing, and they don't seem to get the scale of a football club you're coming to. You've got one player over there, Donny van der Beek, that was walking around in a suit. One player that looked like he's turning up around his mate's house. And I know that's kind of an old-fashioned way of looking at things, but it's about respect and culture and understanding where you are. And I worry about younger players not having it infused in them because society doesn't allow it anymore. Because once upon a time, you used to have the apprentices cleaning the boots and cleaning the gym, and can't do that anymore. Not even the PFA will allow that. They'll be straight in the door and saying that can't happen to young players. So you're not building any character in these players. So when all of our backstories, all of the challenges, all of the issues that we have in our lives come knocking on the door, they only come knocking when adversity comes. Nobody hears about them when you're flying.
You can't argue against that, Carl, can you?
When you reach a crossroads,
100% he's right.
then it comes knocking. And that is about the way that we're bringing people into society and what we're allowing them to do and what characters we're bringing. And that's the challenge that we have to overcome.
That, on what Simon said there, I know it's about optics, this part of what he said there. But when you saw Dele Alli walking around Goodison that night, and dressed the way he was dressed, and good God, who am I to give out fashion advice? But he says Van der Beek, shirt and tie, others, shirt and tie. You saw Jude when he signed for Real Madrid. My God, did he look $1 million? These things matter, Carl, don't they?
Listen, there's always going to be individual preference of how you want to dress and how you want to act and how you want to live your life, and we should never pigeonhole because Van der Beek does this, he shouldn't do that.
And he was useless there as well.
Right, and I don't fall for that. What I do agree with, that I think there's moments when you've got to think a little bit different to what you really want to be to make people buy into you. You spoke before about, I think, Tuchel, that he does all the right things in the media and he comes in and does the wrong thing. That's not right either. By doing the right thing first and the wrong thing second. For me, Dele went in there and tried to be an individual. I think from that moment, everything started to break. Then his injuries came out, the mental health situation he had, going to was it rehab clinic he went to in America. It all started coming out. None of us knew at that moment in time where Dele Alli was in his life and where he sat.
Fair point.
And for me, it's not just footballers. It's frustrating when people say footballers. It's life in general. Now, I've got an issue with young players in general, but I don't think they're challenged enough and put through adversity in the early years to build a resilience to cope. I remember a young player, Steve Highway, coaching a young player at Liverpool, and he said one or two things. I think he maybe cried, and he said to the parents, "Be a parent, look after and love your child. My responsibility is to make you be able to compete and to cope with the pressures of playing for Liverpool Football Club."
And that's right. I remember when I first bought Palace, walking into the academy director, and he said to me, "A child's like an open book. You write a new page every day." I said, "What a load of old pony. We want to produce these guys, these kids. This is a hard business. Only 1 or 2% of them are going to get through our academies into professional football. You need to start preparing these young men for the realities of life and all that goes with it, not to turn them into jugglers or to turn them into projects where everything is said to them is said in a fashion that only is pleasant. They need to be prepared to if it doesn't work here, they fall back on something else." And so I think the character of young players is established at a very early age, and there's too much of mollycoddling going
very
on.
Briefly, Carl, I was just going to ask you very briefly, and then we'll move on. Do you think Dele Alli can yet go some way to achieving what Jadon Sancho has done?
Listen, he's 5 years older, 6 years older. I think it's time for the talking to stop now. I think he has to have a summer where his pre-season is right, and all of this talking and all this positivity. Yeah, it's brilliant. I'm happy to see him happy, first and foremost. Now I'll be even happier if he goes and does what he loves, and I know he's working hard. I do know that. I do know he has got the bit between his teeth. I do know he wants to be successful. I do know he's looking in the face of adversity. I do know there's going to be an element of fear, because we all carry that around with us. Doesn't matter who you are at whatever level. And the big thing for me now is that he goes and just stands there, puts his chest out, and works his hardest, and success will follow with that.
Okay. Karl Robinson with us live in talkSPORT.
Jim White and Simon Jadon. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.